Hello and welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. My name is Axel and I'm the host of the Ideal Investor Show, where we show you the path to early retirement. Hello and welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. Pete, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that you could make the time, and welcome to the show. So without much ado, I want to ask you a little bit for our audience. Could you give us a little bit an idea of who is Pete Mohr? What do you do? How do you reduce the chaos?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on the show here today, Alex. I really appreciate it. And it's an exciting thing. I am Pete Mohr, and I have a couple of different businesses. I call myself a multipreneur. Over the last many years,
Cool.
pretty much my entire life, I've always owned more than one business. I've only worked for somebody else for about 6 months coming out of university. It was my dad's best friend. He was an entrepreneur too, and in fact, I'm named after him. But just a little back story there. I worked for him for a little while, helped him set up some stuff at the time and everything. But at that time, I really determined that working for somebody else wasn't for me, and so I got into my own businesses, and I've been running several different service businesses. Now I have retail businesses. So we own a couple of shoe stores called Shoetopia, and live in a beautiful small town about an hour outside of Toronto in Elora, Ontario. And so we have a couple of shoe stores, but I also help people through my Simplifying Entrepreneurship business, which is my entrepreneurial coaching business. And I say, cut through the chaos, like you said, and I help them transform their frustrations into freedoms. And I know that's one of the things from an investment standpoint, you're always trying to create freedom for people, right? And we're trying to do that too, with regards to, entrepreneurs are often overworked, overwhelmed, frustrated. They get into business thinking that it's going to give them the life that they want, and then they find out that it's a lot of hard work, and they don't know how to use some systems and things to free up their time and their money and their all the different things that they want to roll through. So that's essentially where I come in, help them out with some of that sort of stuff. We set up systems and frameworks and hopefully give them their time back, their energy back, give them the love back for their business if they've lost a little bit of that along the way too, and help them with their culture and their teams, and work through the 4 Ps, which I find always the biggest things in business is the right product mix, the right process, the right people, so that you can have the right product in order to create those freedoms. So that's basically in a nutshell what it's all about, Alex.
Yeah, that's awesome, and thank you for describing that so concise. I wish I could. I'm always struggling with being that concise. One thing on those 4 Ps that I think sticks out to me a little bit, and I mean they're all important. I'm totally in agreement with you.
Sure.
And I don't know, you said you call yourself a multiple or multipreneur. Since I have 2 businesses, am I a doublepreneur then? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now I've got two that are on hiatus because of all the COVID stuff. So until we can convene people, those have been sort of locked down for the last year and a half. So I'm down to 2 right now too, as far as operating businesses. But from that perspective, it doesn't matter how many businesses you have. You're just spreading risk, Alex. I think from that perspective, when we look at it back to the financial side of things, it's like, okay, you don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket, and you do want to spread out your risk, and you do want to have some different things on the go and different funnels of income and what have you as well. And from the Simplifying Entrepreneurship side of things, I just love talking business. It's what I do and what I'm very passionate about. So from that perspective, I spend a lot of my time these days there, because I've set my business up with Shoetopia in sort of a turnkey fashion that allows me the opportunity to have conversations like we're having right now with you,
absolutely.
I don't have to be on the sales floor selling all the time. And yes, am I involved in major decisions and those kind of things? Absolutely. I own the business, but we've got, accountabilities in place, processes in place, people in place, all those kind of things that really take care of business. So essentially that business is somewhat of a passive investment. And, I don't have to spend 90 hours a week there. I spend, a lot less than that in order to earn my income from it.
Yeah, and you used a few terms that also fit into the strategy and model. I mean, for those of you or in the audience or your audience, when you share, hopefully the recording ultimately with your audience and your platform, there are a couple of terms that fit into what we call the out-of-state turnkey residential real estate investing strategy. One, when you were describing the 4 Ps, that kind of struck me is you called it product.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we're finding when people are coming to the realization, okay, what do I do in investing? Or most of the time, they don't ask themselves so much, what do I do in investing? The question is even a little further simplified to the point to say, okay, I know I make money and it's not good to just consume all of it, even if I have some sort of a retirement plan that is associated with my employer. So I know, especially if you're younger, Social Security, as we call it here in the US, may or may not be there for you. So that shouldn't really be your plan. Or people get the realization, if I have some additional money or money that I can put aside, we used to say save when there were still interest rates that you could get, right? So what can I do with the money?
Not to lose more, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, in Europe, they have negative interest rate now.
Crazy.
You have to pay to put your money in the bank. It's kind of weird. But no, what I'm getting at is people ask the question, okay, what do I do with my money, with this additional money that I want to grow and I want to get to this passive income? I coined the term time freedom point, which I basically, as people have read about and heard me say, the point in time on the calendar somewhere in the future where your passive income reaches the level that you cover all your expenses. And you think about what are those, not just the living expense. If you like to travel, that is probably a certain amount of money you need, or car or boat or whatever it is. But whatever that number is, and the time freedom point would be that day or that month when you make enough passive income to cover all of that number, all of that expense. And then have the freedom no longer to be, like you said, be unemployable and not have to work for somebody else, but basically live your passion, which could include to keep doing, like if you started a business and you love to do it, you could keep doing that, dial that back a little if you like, or it could be, I've had this passion all along, but I could never live into it because I needed to cover my obligations first and my expenses and my costs and all of that. So all those things are associated with the time freedom point. But one of the things when the people go beyond this point to say, what do I do with money, and start studying with this extra money, is that let's just for a second say they come to the conclusion, okay, I want to do this real estate investing stuff that I hear on Bigger Pockets and Axel show. And I heard Pete say you should do something good and valuable with your money. And then to this P about product, there seems to be a little bit of a what in my other business in the consulting work we call that scope creep.
Yeah.
Right. Where I say, and I've done it and I'm living it and I'm trying to help people if they like me to help them, focus on like what we call residential real estate, which is defined as single family all the way to fourplex. The government in the US supports it massively. So that's the product focus. So can you tell a little bit from your experience working with entrepreneurs, whether it's something similar in the investment world or other places, how important it is to kind of determine and put the rails on what your product line is?
Yeah, I mean, we own shoe stores. So I'll just put it back into that flavor for right now. We have probably about 50 different brands in our stores right now. Mm-hmm. And so our selection is pretty vast. And within those brands, there's all sorts of different, SKUs of products of different shoes. So we really have a wide variety of product within the one store. But from that perspective, we'll focus on what we call departments, and, a hiking department or a running department or a casual department or whatever the case is. And the selection within those departments may involve multiple different brands. So there's lots of different ways to look at product selection, and product, by the way, is service too. So if you're a service oriented business, it's the same sort of thing.
Right.
But the real thing is, what are you known for? And you need to own a certain area of your offering. you need to be known as at least the local person that owns that area of offering, so that within your sort of 10-mile radius, you're really known as the go-to person for that particular product. The other products around that, like you said, you're focusing on that one sort of thing, and that's where you build the majority of your business. All of your marketing, all of the different things that you're doing, and the messaging that you're putting out there, all those things are around that one sort of key focus area. And you need to make sure when it comes to products that you have the right supplier in place, that you have the right partnership, the right relationships, the right, all the things that they can deliver what it is, because it's your name that's there. I mean, if you're delivering it, that's great. You have full control over that if you're providing a service. But if there's a product involved with that, you need to make sure that some of those ties are right and some of that chain aligns with your mission, your goals, your obligations, and everything to your clients and your team. So all around those different things, the product mix or service mix, as you call it, yes, I agree. You need to be sort of very focused on sort of your main bread and butter, basically. Yeah. And then you roll out the other ones after you get that knocked, after you systemized that and automated it and made it sort of turnkey. Once that's turnkey, then you can move on to the next step.
Right, understood. And would it be fair to say this, what you be known for, is then also what you're pounding basically in your branding messages, in your marketing, so forth?
For sure. So much of what I do at Simplifying Entrepreneurship is around that. It's like solidifying and clarifying, because my philosophy is that when you have clarity, you build confidence. And when you have confidence, you build momentum. So with the clarity of really understanding the language around what that is, which is what we build and all that sort of stuff, come up with that. Then you have the components to go out and push it out there, both to your team internally so that they're fully on board with the mission and the vision and what I call guiding principles, and also to your clients so that they fully understand what that product is, how you're going to deliver it, and everything around it. What's how do I get the product? What's the call to action? What does life look after I have the product? How are you going to help me through my problem? Because as marketers, what we need to do is determine what is that problem, and then we need to solve the problem for them, and then we need to show them what life looks like after they use our services. Yeah, so awesome. if we do that, then we've done our job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going on a little thin ledger out here, like they say in sailing terms, making an assumption. If somebody came to you and say, "Hey, Pete, do you have a department for like wedding dress shoes and evening gown shoes and these really fancy glitzy kind of shoes? Do you have that department?"
No.
Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't fall off the ledge.
Yeah. So
but the point is why I bring this up as a question, kind of jokingly, but also somewhat serious. What would you say if somebody came to you and say, "Well, wouldn't it be a good idea to have that department?"
Yeah. So no, to be honest, we do have a few shoes depending on what you're looking for. Like if you're looking for a 6-inch stiletto, like the bride shoe, no, we don't cover that. Or do we carry some what I call comfortable dress shoes that you could wear to a wedding, but probably not if you were in the wedding party? Absolutely, because that's more in alignment with what we do. We, our focus around Shootopia, just to put it in perspective, is we're trying to provide people our tagline is look great and feel fantastic. So I've narrowed it down, and I try to work with our clients to narrow things down into sort of visual and how they feel things and all this other stuff. But I've narrowed it down to 9 letters that explain Shootopia. And they are OOH, O-O-H. When you look in the mirror and you're like, ooh, I look pretty good. and the next 3 are which is, those feel awesome. And then the next 3 are aha. And aha is, I've finally found the shoe that looks great and feels awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, thank you for describing it. And that is actually a really good thing, because it bridges a little bit to what we talk about oftentimes is when I mentioned the time freedom point, it's not just a number. It is, in a sense, something similar to what you were just describing. You want to really become clear, why am I doing it and what am I doing it for? Right. Sure. To say, I just want to achieve a certain number by making certain amount of investments so that I can basically just very systematically and mathematically develop a path to get me to that number. I would basically, and I always say this to our mentoring clients, that takes away that really, really important emotional connection to why you're doing it. Because when that's missing, and there are stumbling stones, and I'm sure they happen in every business, and you see, and probably your clients come to you because they experience certain things like that. There needs to be like an energy and motivation in a way that gets you over that and keeps you on track, maybe with minor refinements, but the goal should be strong enough and emotionally connecting enough to keep you going even in adversity. So that's why I really focus on that at the beginning a lot, to say, let's spend some time to really become clear, what do we want and what is it for? Just having the money, because I mean, sometimes when we talk about it, right, like I'm sure when you're doing a reorg or help somebody to get over the chaos, it's not now that we reach the point that we're over the chaos, work or life is over. No, that's actually the beginning. We're basically doing all of this to get to the beginning point, and with the time freedom point, it's the beginning of the kind of like that life that you envision. But you need to, at some point early on, spend time to say, how is that vision supposed to look like, and how can I really live in and energize in it so that it motivates me no matter what. So you use the term turnkey. From your perspective as a retail business owner, we use the term turnkey in our investing philosophy as well, working with high-end, high-quality turnkey providers. Could you just, to start a little bit in that direction, describe how you would define turnkey in your world?
Well, just to put it back a little bit, one of my former businesses, which was called Surface Medic, we did bathtub refinishing, bathtub refacing, walls and refacing of cabinets and all sorts. I worked in almost, thousands of, we literally were in 1,000 rental units a year with my business doing that sort of work. So fully familiar with rental properties and all of that sort of stuff. And for me, and I've seen ones that aren't turnkey. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the worst of the worst. And, from that perspective, when I look at turnkey, it's really around this idea of being able to turn the key, which means I can turn the key and walk in and rent the unit. And then once it's rented, I can turn the key and leave. It's ready to go. It's ready to rent. It's already, it's up to me to market that property, for example, or up to, if I elect to hire somebody to do that. But in my case, with a turnkey business, I elect to hire a manager to do it.
Absolutely.
And the manager runs the business. And in properties, a lot of people do that too, depending on how close they are and all the other different things along with it. Yeah. But from that perspective, is it giving me the cash flow that I need out of that investment? So whether that's a business investment or whether it's a property investment, it's the same sort of thing, but it's got to be able to repeat that investment, that coming back to you in somewhat of a hands-off variety. Are there going to be times where you have to be involved? Sure, there are. But ultimately, it's one of those passive investments that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you because our view on what does it really mean aligns, I would say, almost completely. And my definition would be the same. The one thing, and especially I didn't know about this refinishing bathtub stuff, so that's very cool. That's a tiny form of flipping, I guess, in a way, just focused on one part of the property. But one of the things that I find so important, and I want our audience, both from a big picture perspective, but even when you focus on, okay, I want to be involved in real estate investing to get this passive income, get to this time freedom point. In this context that you said, okay, it really means I can turn the key and open the door and I have a nice renovated property in front of me. For me, the other component, and what I emphasize about high quality turnkey providers, is that it shouldn't just be nicely looking and freshly renovated on the surface, on the first view. And one thing that I like to point out, and I wonder how much that applies when you look at other businesses that you're involved with or helping other businesses, there is what I would call a psychological component. And that's why I select very specifically and recommend our clients and audience members to select very specifically what kind of a turnkey am I looking for. And the psychological component is, if you are the entity, the business that hires you, Pete, for your refinishing business and others and so forth, they have like a organizer or a component department within the turnkey company that works with all these different specialists that do the bathtubs, the kitchens, the floors, the ceilings, the windows, you name it, everything that needs renovation. And they are ultimately directly involved within the same company under the same roof. When that purchase has happened, I have received the key, I turn the key, or more realistically, I hand the key to a tenant who then opens that door and makes that the home. That the same people who managed and organized this renovation, including Pete's company with the bathtubs, are the ones who manage the property for me as the investor owner. Because you don't have the kind of like excuse when something goes wrong after the tenant moves in and turns on the washing machine the first time and the water isn't hot, to say, well, who do I go to? And then as an owner, you have to find and fight and figure out, was it the water heater installer? Was it the electrician? Was it the gas person? Was it something wrong in the walls when we did the renovation? It doesn't really matter that it is any particular person, as long as it's under the same roof. And I'm saying, I made a deal with you, turnkey provider.
Yeah.
You worked on this property, you sold me this property, now you manage this property. And because of that, if you have any pride, you should be foremost interested to have a product where it's really, like you said, Pete, you turn the key, and not just for the first moment, but for quite a while, several years after that. There shouldn't really be any major things coming up. Now, can something break? Total normal, yes. Wear and tear, everything normal. You have that everywhere. But when it comes to how do I select to work with and really have the benefit, and in our strategy, like I said, the first three letters are OOS, out of state. So it's not even an option in most 99% of the cases to ever manage it yourself. So it's not just, does the current turnkey provider do a good job renovating it and selling it for me at a fair price that it appraises for, but they are and should be, in my view, the same people that also manage it, to have that psychological connection. If we screw it up on the front end, we will suffer for it on the back end. And if they don't, then they have no problem to give you a pretty nice warranty on their work. Besides the fact that it's a certain dynamic when you call them up and say, hey, you guys renovated. Why am I even looking at this? Why haven't you already fixed it? Right. So can you say how that fits maybe in your experience?
Well, for sure. I mean, it's as a former business broker helping people buy and sell business, I was a licensed realtor. So from that perspective, it's the same sort of thing when we look at a turnkey business. I mean, you know, I had the question on a recent podcast, which do you prefer? Do you prefer to buy an underperforming, you know, business that you're willing to put your, you know, blood, sweat, and tears in and grow and build, or do you want to buy a cash flow? And we're having the very same conversation here. You know, do you want to buy the rundown place that you've got to put the roof on and the windows and all the other stuff and, you know, everything? Or do you want to walk into a turnkey investment? And there are trade-offs on both. One is
absolutely.
I mean, you're probably going to get a way better deal buying the fixer-upper, but you're going to come into all the problems and all the other things. And, you know what I think, and everybody, depending on the season of life they're in, there are certain times where the fixer-upper makes sense, and there are certain times where the cash flow option makes sense. And it's the same with businesses too. It's the same thing. And having the manager and those systems that I help people with the frameworks and different things like that. Those are basically, like you just said, it's the kitchen of the, it's the bathroom, it's the mechanical of the actual business that needs to be shored up. It needs to have proper foundations so that the accountabilities can be in place, so that, and it's the same thing you were saying about the manager. We're shoring all that sort of stuff up so that when you're going to your manager, you're saying, hey, what's going on here? What's going on there? And you're gonna have sort of a dashboard of, this is green light, yellow light, or red light, and deal with it if it's yellow light. Basically, if it's red light, I need to be called.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. There's also this fundamentally this component of when you look at the question, you said, where you are in your stage of life, in your evolution in life. And I agree with that. But the other really important factor for anybody who is considering, is it maybe too late to get into a market that is pretty inflated as far as prices go, but there are still properties who really need a lot of care. For me, besides the fact of asking yourself, do I want to maybe switch careers or do this kind of stuff is also a matter of distance, right? I mean, I mentioned twice now out of state, but distance, you could theoretically, I own properties in 2 states, in Idaho and Illinois, and they're literally 3 miles apart because it just so happens that the state line goes across. Right?
Right. Yeah.
If you live in one and you renovate one on the other side of the river, that's one thing.
Yep.
If your distance gets, I always say, if it gets anything more than 30 to 45 minutes, then you basically a turnkey customer, because and I don't want to go too deep, but one of the fundamental things is trusting somebody else. And in a case, and you have been there with your bathtub renovations, that's one slice of a massive loaf of bread.
For sure.
And you would basically have the lucky circumstance that every single representative of these slices, the bathtub person, the kitchen person, the floor person, the roof person, you can,
the painter
can imagine how big that loaf is. And every single one of those needs to be trustworthy and good enough to be doing everything they should do without supervision. Because if you were close enough, you would supervise them. Yep. If you are too far away, so you can't supervise them, the only other way that you get it done in a good way is trust.
Yep.
And as much as I love to trust into people, the likelihood, and we started this conversation with risk, and so I kind of want to bring it back to risk, right? Like that would be a massive, massive risk to say there are 50 different things. Like you said, 50 different brands in your shoe store. We have 50 different slices on this loaf of renovation for a property. How likely is it that they are all so independently excellent that they don't need supervision? And that brings it back why I say, well, if you know that you're in a place that's too expensive to make it work with a cash flow model, then you have to go out of state, which also means you need one partner, and the dynamic of that partner then being also the one who knows when we sell it to you, then we also manage it for you. Those things together really, and I have to just do it, Pete. I hope you forgive me. That makes the shoe out of it, that brings it all together, makes it a nine letter type of shoe that is comfortable and perfect and everything, right? So that's actually a German saying, make a shoe out of it, is, you make the shoe fit perfectly to your foot. So
the perfect fit.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to transition, if you don't mind, to a few of the questions that we ask every guest.
For sure.
And like to ask, the first one of those questions would be, are there any particular person that you would love to meet or admire a lot, and why?
Well, there are several. One of the people that I'm following a lot these days, and have been for quite some time, he's one of my very favorite marketers. His name is Dean Jackson, and I've been on sort of these kind of calls with Dean, and I've been a part of some of his coaching and some of those things. But just to sit back and play around a golf or to go have a beer or something with Dean Jackson, I think would be interesting. I mean, he's the guy that started the squeeze play, like the whole pop-ups that come on when you go and drilling down. He's created so many interesting things. The way he copyrights, the way he does all sorts of things, he's a marketing genius. So for me, I'd like to have a chat, a beer, a round of golf, supper with Dean Jackson.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Maybe I could join you.
I love that.
On that conversation. So the second question I like, and I found a lot of interesting answers from our guests, is if you had a time machine. And by the way, some people have said which direction, either way, it could go forward or backward. If you had a time machine, where would you go, and what would you want to do, or why would you go there?
Well, for me, Alex, I'd take that back about 35 years or more. I'm 50 now. So, come back into my early teens, and I would be sitting at the supper table, probably around Christmas time at my grandparents' farm, enjoying family time, enjoying, spending that time with my grandparents and with the rest of my extended family, and really just, having a good meal, playing some cards, being together. I miss, in particular, miss my grandfather a lot, and he passed away a long time ago. But I still think about him, and it's one of those things. If I could only have the opportunity to have another supper and to have some time with some people that are gone now, that were near and dear to me, I think that would be my absolute choice.
Yeah, that would be really cool. One quick thing, is there any particular thing that you've been saying to yourself, if they were still here or he were still here?
Yeah.
That's one thing I would definitely want to ask him.
I'm just interested, I think, Alex, in how things were, and I'd like to go back and say, okay, grandpa and my grandmother lived quite a bit longer, so I had chances to chat with her. But from that perspective, it's like, what was life like? And tell me more about how you grew up and what you did and the trials and tribulations and the struggles and the things you had to overcome. And, people think we have it tough now. Well, I'll tell you, there were some tough times, and the depression that we've just gone through, and what COVID has brought us over the last couple of years, compared to the depression in the 1930s, or the world wars, some of those kind of things that went on, would be very interesting conversations, I think, and things that are just things I'd like to hear personally from someone.
Yeah, it's amazing, Peter. I have to say again how much we are aligned, obviously, in some of the things that we are interested in, because that aspect, I mean, I haven't said this publicly a lot, but my grandma basically raised me, not because my parents weren't there, but because they both had to work.
Yeah.
Right? So I was dropped off at 7 a.m. at my grandma's house and picked up basically something like 5:30ish or something like that. And all day long, I mean, she made sure that I went to elementary school and later then to middle school. And she was also the one who taught me that if you make a mistake, you rip out the page. You don't just use an eraser or something like that and stuff. So she was pretty tough, but it was really tough love. But one of the things that I'm kind of disappointed about in a sense, I can rationalize it, but it's still a little bit of a nag, because we had a lot of great conversations. But now, having way more experience and a little bit better perspective on life, there are things where I know the answers would have been so informative, not to change my life in hindsight, but to say, I see similarities, for example, what has been happening in the last 10 years to democracy and to business, and how people see certain things and what they react to what they lived through. Like you said, these struggles and tribulations. And I would love to know how and why did you do what you do the way you did, and how does it then compare? But, so that's why I love that question. The last one has nothing to do with business or investing or stuff like that. It's basically a capstone and a little bit off the beaten track kind of question is, what's the meaning of life for Pete?
Well, the meaning of life, I think we covered it a little bit already. And the meaning of life for me is, well, first of all, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And, I love the proverb around, there's sort of this ancient saying that says, he who has his health has 1,000 dreams, and he who does not has but one. Right. And I've seen that personally. I've seen people suffering, and the only thing they wanted was to feel good again. Didn't matter how much money they had, didn't matter what else was around, didn't matter. All they needed was to feel good again. So for me, the meaning of life is stay healthy, because I can't live life if I'm not healthy. And then after that, in behind health is this whole idea of why I'm an entrepreneur, because I want to create the freedoms from my business and have them give me the life that I want. And those freedoms, Dan Sullivan puts it great, which is another one of my coaches in the past. He lays it out and says, it's the freedom of time, it's the freedom of money, it's the freedom of relationships, and it's the freedom of purpose. And so if you're healthy, you can enjoy those freedoms. And that's basically what I do at Simplifying Entrepreneurship too, is to help entrepreneurs get back those freedoms so that they can enjoy the life that they want to live.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you so much, Pete, for that. So one thing, I don't know if you're aware of it, but a lot of people in the media and social media had been basically given or trying to give the picture and the impression that with this whole lockdown situation and the pandemic in the last 18 months, the vast majority of people were just sitting at home doing nothing or starting to learn how to cook a bread or bake a bread or stuff. In an article I recently wrote, research a little bit, is actually in this time period in the United States, 6 million new businesses were formed.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And that's a lot of people, I think, probably predominantly without any significant previous experience on how to build a business, how to run a business, how to grow a business and stuff like that. So with that kind of as the frame, how can any of those 6 million people get a hold of Pete?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is to go to my website, and that's mohr.coach, mohr.coach, so mohr.coach, or you can just type in Google Simplifying Entrepreneurship, which is the name of my business, and you'll find the connections for me and for my podcast and for everything else around it. But Simplifying Entrepreneurship is long. So if you want to go the short version, you can just type in mohr.coach and it'll get you there too. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social channels, Instagram and Facebook.
We're connected on LinkedIn. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And just for the audience, if you didn't have a pen or you were driving or anything like that, we're going to put all of this in the show notes and under the video and so forth. So we'll easily find it. Awesome. So with that being said, Pete, I really want to thank you again for coming on, for making this a really interesting conversation, because oftentimes I talk to people who are mainly focused in whatever narrow niche in investing they do. So having somebody who has this much broader multipreneur approach and experience was really awesome. So thank you again. Any final words?
I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed our conversation, Alex, and it's so good to meet you. And I'm hoping that we can maybe have further this conversation somewhere down the road.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Make it a great day.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Ideal Investor Show. More info and the links we mentioned during the show are in the show notes, or you can go to our website at idealwealthgrower.com and find them there. Sign up for the Apple Podcast link, the RSS feed, the Spotify link, and if you like to talk to me, please sign up for a strategy call at idealwealthgrower.com. So hopefully you want to share what you learned with your network and bring more people in. We are really eager to hear your comments. And until next time, be well, stay safe, and ciao.